All right, now let's take a look at the beginning of the story, right? Every historical process has a beginning, and our beginning is with classical economics, and this starts in the 18th century, which is the 1700s, okay? So, as I said, remember, in order to be a fully informed economist, you got to realize that economic theory has evolved. And it evolved basically from philosophers in the 1700s and 1800s. In the late 1800s, as things got more industrialized and more complex in the sense of what to look at in terms of human behavior, mathematics became part of the story in economics, which is where we started getting all of our graphs and things. And then as you get into the 1900s and the 20th century, or 21st century, the 2000s, what you find is you have a combination of philosophy, mathematics, and psychology. Remember that. Philosophy, mathematics, and psychology. And with those three tools is what we look at economics with in this course. Okay? So let's start at the beginning of the story, right? The beginning of the story starts in 1776, but before Adam Smith wrote his book called The Wealth of Nations, the world functioned in a form called mercantilism. And if you think about your history classes, like mercantilism is the form of the economic system that was employed by the British more than anybody else, which was basically the government was heavily involved in the economy, okay? And at that time, what created wealth for a nation, and that's what you have to understand, that like we're talking about the wealth of a nation, and that means wealthy of people in it, was the supremacy of gold and silver. So if you were Spain or France or Great Britain or Portugal or the Dutch, right, or the Belgians, what you were looking for was gold in the first place, right? Well, gold and silver established the wealth of a nation. And the goal, therefore, was to maximize exports. So I'm British and I want to sell my stuff to other people. So I'm going to go get colonies all around the world. And minimize imports. I don't want your stuff, Spanish. I don't want French wine. I just want my German beer maybe, or my British beer, or my Irish beer, okay? Or my English beer, right? So you minimize imports, and that was the model, okay? So if you think about the colonial era of European history, you understand how it is that it functioned before Adam Smith got involved, okay? So Adam Smith, remember this too, he's Scottish. Okay, he's living in what is now the United Kingdom. He is looking at the most industrialized economy at the time in the world because the Industrial Revolution starts in Great Britain, in England. Okay, so with Adam Smith, we consider him to be the place or the birth, with him is the birth of modern economics, or what we're going to call now, and you need to know these terms, classical economics. He wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, which revolutionized economic thought, okay? So here is his major transformational thought. And this is substantially different from what was the view beforehand. And that is the wealth of a nation is not based on the accumulation of gold and silver, but on the value of the goods and services it produces. Did you hear that? The wealth of a nation, this is what Adam Smith said, this is the modern economics, this is what we're going to study together, is not based on the accumulation of gold and silver, but on the value of the gold, the value of the goods and services it produces. And that's what we now call gross domestic product. Fast forward to present tense. The largest economy on this planet, the most powerful economy on this planet is the United States. And why is it so powerful? Because it has the most gold and silver? No. Because the stuff that it produces has the highest value. What do they produce? Goods and services. You add up that output, that's the gross domestic output product of the United States, and they're the largest economy, okay? This idea, and you can see it, pervades even now. A lot of this stuff pervades in our studies of economics now, and it started with Adam Smith, okay? So what else did he say? Okay. Adam Smith's transformational thoughts that worker productivity is key to increasing wealth. So think about it. If wealth is now not about gold and silver, it's about producing goods and services, then how do you produce goods and services as efficiently as possible? Because that's the way you're going to get wealthy, right? Well, I'll tell you how you do it. The division of labor, okay? The division of labor is one thing, and it's the specialization of labor. And there are lots of examples of this, but what I like to think about is like an assembly line. Henry Ford, 1900s, he said he had specialization of labor, and he had one worker doing one thing over and over and over and over again. And the assembly line thing is like, the car moved through the workers as opposed to the workers going to the car. So there was an assembly line, and as these parts were added, they ended up creating a car. And one person just, they just put the bolt in. They just put the bolt in. They just put the bolt in. The next person screwed it in, right? So division of labor and specialization of labor is a critical underpinning of economic growth nowadays, okay? He also created something called the labor theory of value. So it's sometimes like best to read economic terms backwards. The value of something is based on the theory, the labor of it, okay? So what does that mean? Yeah, what does that mean really? It means cost of production equals the value of the product produced. So what is the value of this mate cup? Well, this mate cup, according to Adam Smith, is worth the cost of producing it. So in order to make this mate cup, which is made out of tin, metal and paint and blah, 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 and the workers and all that, you would add up the cost of production. So the value of this might be $5, but where do you get that value? From the cost of the production of it, okay? So the value of this comes from the cost of production. Remember that. It's going to change in a little bit, but remember that. The value of this mug comes from the cost of the cost of the inputs, the cost of production, okay? The other thing, and if you study Adam Smith, you may know this, there's this notion of this invisible hand, right? The invisible hand is as opposed to the governmental hand. So in mercantilism, the government's hand was heavily involved in the market. So the government's in there moving pieces around, deciding production, deciding exports, deciding imports, deciding taxes, deciding who's going to do what, right? So that's called the allocation of resources. The allocation of resources in the mercantile system, or the system before the free markets, the government's hand was in there. And it was sort of quote, fixing things. Okay. What Adam Smith said is if you really want the best allocation of resources, which means the people who are best at doing one thing are doing that thing, and the people that are best at doing something else are doing that thing, that's specialization, right? And division of labor. If you're a teacher, teach. If you're an accountant, count up, the bills. If you are a lawyer, be a lawyer. If you're a medical doctor, do the surgery. But let's not have the teacher doing the surgeries, right? So division of labor, specialization, right? And what the visible hand was that if the government would get his hand out of the marketplace, those things would take care of themselves. And the reason that would happen is based on two fundamental ideas that you're going to have in your head throughout your studies of economics. And that is that, check it, consumers maximize their utility. Utility is an economic way of saying happiness. I'm happy because I bought new shoes. I'm happy because I have a new shirt. I'm happy because I have a new iPad, right? Utility, right? So consumers' utility and combined with producers' interest in what? Maximizing their profits. And therefore, the market will self-regulate, which means that there's no hand, the hand is invisible, and as a result of that, the best allocation of resources in a market will happen. What does that mean? Okay, if this mate cup costs $5 to make, put it over here, here's the producer, it costs $5 to make. I'm over here, right? I look at that, I'm like, ooh, I like that, I'm gonna buy it. And I'm thinking in my head, I'll buy it for 10. And this person over here, no, I'll buy it for other way around. I'd pay I don't know, $8 for that, right? And the seller, the producer is like, well, I want to sell this for 10 because I want to make double, right? And I come up there and I say, hey, you know what? I would love to buy that for $8, right? And the person says, well, you know what? No, actually, I want 10. And then we decide on the price of 9. Oh, what did we do? We'd established that the value of this, not because the government was involved, but I wanted the thing, right? The producer's maximizing profit, I'm maximizing my utility, which means I pay the lowest price possible for something that I want. I really wanted to pay 8, but I paid 9. The producer really wanted 10, but they got 9. And therefore, the system itself fixed itself. And if you can't sell mate cups for $9, then you're gonna go out of business. And so the market is what's called self-regulating or self-righting, and that's not without any of the government getting involved. Okay? Those are the transformative thoughts of Adam Smith. Okay. So what did he say? He also said, and check this out, free trade is the key to the prosperity of nations, not mercantilism, not tariffs on imports, right? But free trade. So he was an advocate of free trade over protectionism, and he believed, and he sort of like coined this phrase of laissez-faire economics, which is where the economy functions as freely as possible from the intervention of the government. And what is the economy? Consumption, production, and trade happens as freely as possible. No government intervention, right? No government intervention. What's government intervention? Taxes on things, sales taxes, income taxes, tariffs on things coming in and out of a country. So what he said is the best outcome will be if producers maximize their profits and consumers maximize their utility, their happiness, it'll arrive at the best market prices for all of things. It'll make more things produced at a lower price, okay? That is the overall understanding of classical economics. It comes from Adam Smith. And the one last thing, and a lot of people forget this about Adam Smith, is this. The government, in his mind, does have a role to play, but that role is in defense, armies, defending a country, education of the people, infrastructure, bridges, roads, airports, deep water ports, electricity, cell service, those things, rule of law, and the punishment of crime. And this last part is really important. The rule of law in economics is critical. And if you live in a country or if you've traveled to countries that are underdeveloped, it could be for a lot of reasons. I lived in Nicaragua for 4 years, and the thing about Nicaragua is there's no rule of law. And what that means is the people in power are also the people that control the legal system. The politicians control the legal system. It's a very corrupt place. I love that country. I left a piece of my heart in Nicaragua. I love that place. But the reason why it hasn't developed economically is a result of the government's abuse of the country by not following the rules. If you look at the most prosperous countries on this planet, they are places where rule of law is in place. All of Western Europe, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, those places are the wealthiest nations on this planet, and it's because the government itself is providing the infrastructure, the education, the rule of law, punishing crimes, holding people accountable, and as a result of that, economies can flourish, or economics can flourish. Then people become able to participate in the economic system, and as a result of that, they become wealthier, and it multiplies throughout the generations. And there we have it, my friends, an overall look at the beginning of the story of modern day economics, which is the classical view, and it started in 1776 with our good friend Adam Smith. And now, my friends, we're rolling on to the next video.